First story, The Painted Return. I remember the night the carnival came to Willow's End like a scar that never healed. The air smelled of popcorn and rain, and the lights from the Ferris wheel reflected off puddles like broken stars. I was only 9 then. My father had taken me to the carnival because he said I needed to learn to be brave. We walked through crowds of laughter and neon. I remember how the music warped as the night stretched on, too slow, too deep. Then, behind one of the tents, I saw him. A clown. He stood perfectly still, half hidden behind a curtain of red and white stripes. His paint was smeared, his hair gray under the colored light. But what I remember most was his smile, wide, cracked, too real for paint. In his hand he held a balloon, red and sagging like it had been filled with blood instead of air. "Hey there, kid," he said. His voice was wrong. It sounded like it came from inside my head. "Want a prize?" He held out a small wooden horse. It looked hand-carved, old. I reached for it because I was a kid, and kids trust gifts. The moment my fingers touched it, he whispered something I didn't understand. Then he laughed, low and broken, and vanished into the dark behind the tent. I ran back to my father crying. He told me clowns were just people in costumes. I wanted to believe him, but that night when I got home, I found the balloon tied to my window latch. 10 years passed. I grew up, moved away, tried to forget Willow's End, but forgetting never lasts. When my father died, I returned to bury him. The day after the funeral, I saw posters stapled to poles around town. Willow's End Carnival, one night only. I told myself it couldn't be the same one. Carnivals come and go, clowns come and go. But when I saw the tent by the river, those same red and white stripes, my stomach dropped. And hanging from the pole near the entrance was a balloon. Red. Deflated. Inside, everything smelled the same. Grease, rust, old sugar. Children laughed, lights blinked, and for a moment I thought I had imagined it all. But then I saw him, the same clown. Not older, not younger, exactly the same. His cracked paint, his grin. He was standing near the ring toss, handing out wooden toys. He turned slowly when he saw me. "Michael," he said, "you kept it." I reached into my pocket. The wooden horse I'd carried since that night was still there. My throat went dry. "What do you want?" I asked. His smile widened. "You promised me a story," he said, "and I've come to collect." The carnival around us fell quiet. The laughter turned into whispers. The air thickened. "You were supposed to forget," he said softly. "But you didn't." I stumbled back, but the crowd pressed in. People with painted faces, hollow eyes. Their grins didn't move when they breathed. "Let me go," I said. "You already did," he whispered. "That night. You took my gift. Now you belong to the carnival." He reached for my wrist, and when his hand touched my skin, I saw flashes. Children laughing in the dark, their faces covered in paint, their eyes black and empty. I tore free and ran. The crowd didn't chase me, but the laughter followed, low, wet, endless. When I burst outside, the sky had gone wrong. The tents weren't there anymore, just the river, and in its reflection, I saw a Ferris wheel spinning silently in black water. I ran home, locked the doors, told myself it was grief, stress, madness. But when I looked in the mirror, I saw it. The faint trace of paint along the corner of my mouth. Red. Cracked. That was a year ago. Now, when I sleep, I dream of the river and the red balloon tied to my window. And sometimes, when I laugh, I hear another voice laughing with me. The same one from that night. I think he's close again. And this time, when he comes, I won't run, because I can already feel it. The paint under my skin. The smile stretching wider every day. The carnival's coming back to Willow's End, and I think I'm part of the show now. Second story, The Last Laughter. I grew up believing that small towns swallowed secrets like rain soaked into cracked asphalt. Ashfield did that job well. It hid its bruises behind tidy porches and trimmed hedges, but there was one thing it could not tuck away. The memory of a face painted like a smile, and the sound of laughter that never belonged to children. I am telling this now because silence, that reluctant friend, has been replaced by something louder, something that will not be ignored. When I was a child, my name was Ethan Carter, and my world fit into a block of summer afternoons and the crooked playground behind the old Miller's store. That was where I met him the first time. He stood by the faded carousel that no one rode anymore. His costume a riot of too bright color, shoes that seemed too long, and a grin so wide I could see the hard line where paint met skin. He called himself Mr. Marlowe, and he gave me a balloon the color of a bruise. I remember thinking then that adults laughed too loud at things they did not understand. I remember thinking the balloon would never pop. The first time he visited my dreams, he did not speak. He turned the carousel slowly, with gloved hands, and the horses looked like they wanted to run away. He watched me from inside the painted smile, and I felt the air press against my chest. I was 7 then. I did not know how to name the panic that knotted my stomach when he leaned close, whispering promises that smelled of cotton candy and rust. He left a paper coin on my palm, a coin stamped with a wheel and a tiny laughing face. I kept it like a relic. I kept it like a foolish prayer. Nothing good came of that coin. The carousel broke one autumn. The horses lost eyes and fell into mud. The miller's store closed the following year, and the town held a memorial for things that had been useful once and now were not. My childhood friends scattered to colleges and jobs, and I stayed because some people are made to hold a place open. I married Sarah, who could make quiet mornings into something soft, and for a while we managed to keep the house from smelling like regret. Then the letters started. They arrived without return addresses and with stamps from towns I had never heard of. Each one had a single sentence written in a childlike hand. I remember the laugh. At first I laughed too, the kind of laugh you give a prank that flops. It was easier to believe someone was playing a cruel joke. But the coin began to warm in my pocket, and my dreams filled with the carousels turning. 10 years after that first summer, I saw him again. He did not come in the afternoon or at a party. He arrived at 2 in the morning, standing beneath the street lamp like a misplaced ornament. His shoes were caked with mud, and the paint around his mouth had tiny cracks, as if whatever kept it smiling had been stretched thin. He moved with the grace of something that has practiced the same motion for decades. When he tipped his head, the bell on his hat tinkled like a distant bell tower, impossible and exact. He said my name without asking. Ethan, he breathed, and the name felt stolen and returned to me as something dangerous. Then he laughed, and the sound did not match the circle of his lips. It was a carousel's creak, a child's giggle turned sour, a chorus of applause that condolenced the dead. Sarah woke and clutched me as if the house itself might tilt. I could see her body tense, the way love learns armor, and I wanted to be brave for her. I wanted to be brave enough to take him by the arm and demand why he had come back. He lifted a hand that wore a ring like a small blackened moon. "You kept what belonged to me," he said. His voice was a carnival calliope played backward. "You kept a coin. You kept a promise." I had kept nothing. I had kept a crust of fear and dressed it up as memory, and then had the nerve to live my days again. But he was right. I had kept the coin tucked beneath the mattress the night Sarah left, the coin I had kissed as if it could undo the things I'd let happen. And once he found it, the lights began to blink. At first, it was small things. The radio would tune itself to static every night at midnight. The porch light would wink out in a pattern that made me think the old carousel's horses were counting. The town's children started leaving their bikes in the street with their handles twisted like questions. People complained of laughter from alleyways where no one dared to enter. The mayor called it a prank. The police called it vandalism. I called it the beginning. I tried to bargain with him. Men with smiles like his are not meant to be bargained with. They are made of promises. "What do you want?" I asked on a night when the rain came like fingers tapping on the roof. "Leave," I wanted to say. "Go to whatever shadow fed you and take that grin. Take your coins back and leave us ordinary and boring and broken but whole." He tilted his head. "I want the ending," he said. "I want what ends the show." We all have things in our pockets that we imagine will save us. Mine had always been a coin and a child's memory of being brave enough to hide. His version of brave was different. It was the kind that made sure an ending arrived with a laugh. Then the town began to trade sleep for watchfulness. Neighbors took shifts like soldiers on a fence. We left porch lights burning and spoke in small, guarded voices like people who had memorized the last lines of a play. People left and never came back. Sarah left first, tired of the way my eyes darted at shadows, tired of listening to laughter through the vents. She packed what she could carry and left a note that said sorry in a handwriting that shook. I read it until the words blurred. When he came for the ending, he did not come alone. The carousel appeared back where it had been. Rust swallowing its painted horses and lights flickering like insect hearts. I walked there because the town had emptied, and fear is a stubborn animal that leads the unwilling to proof. He stood at the center with a ring of figures behind him. Not quite people, not entirely things. Their faces half-painted, their bodies locked like gears. "You made room," he said. The capitals of his speech were not accents, but shoves. He meant everything he said to feel larger than it was. You kept the coin. You kept the memory. Now you will keep the last laugh. I do not know how to describe the way endings sound. They do not always scream. Sometimes they fold like good paper, soft and clean and final. The carousel spun. The horses moved. The faces around him sang in a language that tasted like iron and cotton candy. I thought of Sarah and the small, ordinary things I had promised to protect. I thought of the boy who had once been brave enough to steal a look and run away. I stepped forward because the other kind of coward does not move at all. I held out my hand and the coin found me as if it had grown roots into my palm. It burned like a coal. He laughed, and that laugh peeled the sky back to reveal whatever was underneath. The figures closed in. They did not need to touch me to take me. They took what I had been in the way a story takes its last page. I felt myself unwrap. Before I let go completely, I shouted the only thing that mattered, not to them, but to the houses that still remembered warmth. "Remember him as he was," I cried. "Remember, name, not paint." My voice broke like glass. For a breath, the horses stopped. The painted faces turned toward me with something that could have been pity or calculation. Then the laughter resumed, but this time it was at me. It was at me. The world folded, soft and terrible, and the carousel swallowed the last of what I had been. If you ever drive through Ashfield on a night when the fog sits low, you might think you hear a faint music threaded through the wind. You might see, at the edge of your vision, a wheel turning where it should not be. If you find a coin stamped with a tiny laughing face, do not pick it up. Leave it to the mud. Leave it to the memory of a town that once thought itself safe. Because some things that come back do not want to be fixed. They want an ending, and they will take it smiling. Third story. The Hollow Grin. I always thought small towns kept their sins buried under cracked porches and dead maples. I was wrong. Ashford kept something else. Something that smiled. My name is Ethan Carver. I grew up on a street lined with split-level houses and baseball gloves left on porches. My father fixed trucks at Jansen Motors, and my mother taught second grade at Lincoln Elementary. When I was 12, I met a clown behind the carnival trailer at the county fair. I still remember how the cotton candy smell stuck to his suit like a second skin. He had a balloon the color of old pennies and a smile that never folded. He called himself Mr. Marlowe. He gave me a trick that never worked and told me I would remember him forever. I laughed him off then, because children laugh at things that scare them, except I never forgot. 10 years later, I moved back to Ashford because my life in Chicago had folded itself into odd jobs and quiet apartments. The town had not changed much. The diner still burned coffee at dawn, the train still complained through the night, and Mrs. Larkin still watered the geraniums on 3rd. But the fairgrounds were different. The old trailer was gone, replaced by a thrift shop and a stack of pallets. I told myself that was proof the past had been swallowed by time. I was wrong. The first sighting was ridiculous and sharp. A red balloon tied to a lamppost near the Riverwalk. It bobbed like a single eye. I stood frozen across the street because something in the way it moved, that slow, patient bob, pulled the hollow in my chest wide enough to fall into. I crossed without thinking. The balloon string was knotted around a rusted bolt. There was no one in sight. Someone had planted it like a marker. I picked it up and smelled stale grease and sugar. Beneath the string was a scrap of paper with a child's crayon drawing, a grin and a tiny house. My throat closed like a trap. I started seeing small signs after that, a smear of white paint on the back of Mrs. Larkin's mailbox, the faint echo of a squeaky wheel at 2 in the morning, footprints that circled the gazebo at the park and stopped as if someone had decided not to leave. Everyone said it was pranksters, teenagers with too much time and a taste for old terrors. I wanted to believe them. But then my neighbor, Mason Trent, pulled his curtains wide one afternoon, saw something in his yard, and hung himself in the garage 2 days later. The note he left said only, "I looked back." I stopped sleeping. At night, I paced the thin rooms of my rental and listened for the scrape of shoes that weren't mine. Once, at 3 a.m., I heard a faint whistle, like a call used to gather dogs, and the kitchen lights flickered. I turned on every lamp and the television and the stove just to feel the hum of things plugged in. It did not help. The whistle came again, closer, then right outside my door. I opened it. There was nothing, only a smear of cake frosting on the doormat and a single balloon tucked under the welcome mat. I picked up the balloon and, like a fool, tied it to my wrist. The next day at the diner, a woman named Claire, who remembered me from grade school, told me she had seen a man in costume walking toward the old canal. She said, "With the way people tell you something they want to be trivial, that clown looked like a ghost." I smiled to hide the way her words dug into me. That evening, the town posted warnings. "Stay inside after dark. Lock your doors." Someone had written "clown" on the community board with shaky letters. I began to collect the evidence anyone would throw away. A torn piece of striped fabric, a scrap of makeup cake, a child's lost shoe whose laces were tied in a bow like a ribbon on a casket. Each item made a map in my head, a map that ended at the abandoned fairgrounds. The place smelled like grease and old wood, even before I pushed the sagging gate open. I did not tell anyone I was going. I am not a brave man, but fear can become a kind of courage if it has enough room to breathe. Inside the lot, the moon picked out the skeletons of rides. The Ferris wheel leaned like a sleeping giant. The ticket booth was a coffin of glass. When I stepped under the center tent, the air went cold, the kind of cold that presses its thumb against your skull. There, between two rotted poles, stood a man in a suit that had once been bright. His face was a paste of white in color. His eyes were the dull glass of marbles. He did not move. He smiled. He spoke in a voice that used the wrong syllables, as if he were stroking a language like a cat. "Ethan," he said, and my name on his tongue felt like a promise. "You remembered." I should have turned and run. I did not. I took a step closer because the past has a gravity I never learned to resist. He gestured, and the tent lit up in a sick carnival halo. Around us, chairs unfolded and music pressed itself thin into the night air. Children, no, dolls shaped like children, took the seats of the carousel. Their glass eyes reflected me like broken windows. He offered me a trick, a handkerchief, folded so small it fit a child's palm. He told me it would reveal what I feared if I swallowed it. "You swallow, you see," he crooned. My heart battered my ribs. I remembered the 12-year-old me and the smooth palm of the man who said I would remember. I swallowed. The world thinned to a point and then tore. I was back at the fair the day I first saw him, the smell of my mother's perfume and the hot metal of a prize I could not win. Only this time, the boy who was me held a different prize, a small paper clown whose eyes were cut from magazines. The clown in my hand winked and then turned to me. The mister. Marlowe at the center tent clapped slowly. Around me, the tent filled with people, faces from my life, my father, older and ache-lined, Mason, his eyes black with something patient, the teacher who used to hand me gold stars. They all stared, and the stitched child clown opened its mouth. I heard my own voice, thin and small, say, "I promised." I began to remember things I had locked away. The laughter that followed a fall on the carousel, the way the clown had reached for my wrist and left a mark like a coin burn. I remembered a pact I had not known I made, an exchange between a scared boy and a man who collected fear. Each name the clown called out at the tent was a tally. Mason, Claire, Mrs. Larkin. Each tally was a new bell toll in my chest. I realized, with a clarity that seared, that forgetting had been part of the bargain. He fed on being remembered, and when he could not be remembered, he lurked, waiting for someone to call his name. I pulled the handkerchief from my throat and could not breathe. The tent spun with faces that belonged to people who were not dead and those who were. Mr. Marlowe leaned close, and the smell of cotton candy and oil clogged my nose. "Remember me," he said, and his smile cracked like glass. "Remember me again." I screamed. The scream was a sound that woke every false memory in the town. Heads turned in houses like sunflowers, and lights blinked on like stars shaken into the sky. I ran, because that is what had to happen. The clown did not follow at first. He clapped. His laughter boiled into the night, and it grew teeth. Outside the tent, the world felt wrong. I found Mason on the riverbank, sitting where the lamplight couldn't quite reach him. He stared at the water and did not seem to notice me. I grabbed his shoulder. His skin was cold, as if the river had leached something out of him. He looked at me and smiled like a child who has seen the moon fall. "You said you would remember," he whispered. "You said you would bring it back." I realized then, horribly and slowly, that remembering was not enough. The clown wanted larger things. A place at the center of the town's memory, a role in every child's fear. He wanted to be the story parents told to keep themselves from watching their children too closely. He wanted to be the name everyone muttered and did not say aloud. I made a decision that night I cannot say was clean. I found the rope that had been used to hang carnival banners and tied it to the Ferris wheel's weakest spoke. I loaded myself into a seat and waited for the man who collected fear to come and claim his due. When he did, he climbed into the car opposite me and smiled with all the emptiness of a mirror. He leaned in and whispered, "Remember me," like a benediction. The wheel creaked as I pushed my weight against the seat. The town blinked below, a scattering of lamps. I thought of my mother making coffee, of Mason's laugh when he was younger, of the small boy who once believed prizes were everything. I thought of how easy it had been to let a man in a painted suit take my memory. I wrapped the rope tight around my own wrist, and the spoke and pulled. The Ferris wheel spun faster than it should have. The tent lights smeared into lines. The clown's grin widened until it was a thing that could hold you. He looked at me not with eyes but with plate glass. "Thank you," he said, almost kindly. At last. I do not remember the fall in the way others tell it. They say they saw two figures tumble and the wheel collapse like a bad marionette. They say the town gathered and the tent burned in the morning light. They say Mr. Marlowe was gone. They say I was gone too, taken in pieces. They told stories to keep the children away from fairs. But memory is a tricky ledger. Some nights, I wake with the taste of sugar on my tongue and the faint crinkle of a balloon string against my palm. Sometimes I hear a whistle that is not wind. Once in a hospital ward where lights hummed like trapped bees, I saw a reflection that was not my own. White paint, 2 red lips, and glass for eyes. The nurses called it a dream and folded the blanket over me. If you ever pass through Ashford and see a balloon tied to a lamppost, do not assume it is a prank. If you hear a laugh coming from a tent that no longer stands, do not smile and walk on. If you remember a man named Mr. Marlowe, say his name aloud and hold it, because that is the currency he trades in. But be careful, remembering comes with a cost. I learned that too late. I am the story now. I am the thing that returns at night to tighten the rope around people's memories. I do not want to be. I will not be anything else. Remember me. Ostvi tekst bezhodnik zmin. 4th story. When the cotton bell rang. I remember the carnival like a photograph left out in rain. Edges blurred, colors running, but the bell stayed sharp. It hung above the midway like a promise, a little brass chime that tinkled when the moon found a gap between the clouds. They called it the cotton bell because the candy stall hung a single rusted bell over its counter, and children pulled the rope for an extra piece of taffy. I rang that bell once, little fingers slippery with sugar, and the bell sounded thin, almost laughing. I was 8 years old the first time I saw him. He appeared between the tilted mirrors and the Ferris wheel lights, standing so still he might as well have been part of the painted backdrop. His face was white paint streaked with smudges. His smile was too wide, too smooth, like someone had carved it from a smile that didn't belong to him. He held a single balloon, red, but not like the red I knew. It looked as if it were a photo of red, not the real thing. He looked at me, and the smile settled like a stone in my chest. I should have run, but I didn't. I walked forward because children walk toward things that shine, toward things that move, toward faces that promise tricks. He bent down to my height and whispered my name, not said, but made of air that somehow knew the shape of my name. And the world narrowed to the sound of my own breath and the little brass bell above the candy stall. He touched my hand with fingers cold as old coins, and I felt a flicker like an animal sensing a trap. He left a mark on me. Not a scar, something older. I woke the next morning with the taste of salt and rust in my mouth and the smell of powdered sugar stuck behind my teeth. The carnival was gone by noon, trailers toward the horizon, lights sucked into the sky like tired fireflies. They said the clown had been a magician from a traveling show, a man named Silas Merriweather, who'd left the circuit after a show went wrong. A girl fell from the wheel, they said. A terrible accident. The papers called it misfortune, and the town put up a fence around the memory and painted over it. I knew the name because my mother read it in the paper, but the name did not match the face I remembered. Names are sometimes polite lies adults tell to close doors. 10 years passed. I grew taller. I learned how to keep my hands steady when someone asked me for the time. I left Havenbrook, Ohio, for a job in a city that hummed and never slept the way my old town slept. I lived in rooms with clean corners and never hung pictures on the walls. Still, on stormy nights when the air smelled like wet asphalt, I could hear a soft bell somewhere far away. I told myself it was the apartment above mine, or a dream. But dreams don't leave powdered sugar on your tongue. Then, on a night I thought was just like any other, the bell came back. It was near midnight when my phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. If you want to see the show again, meet me where the cotton bell used to hang. I laughed to myself, a short, dry sound, and threw the phone onto the couch. But the message waited. Another followed. Bring the boy who rang it. My hands went cold. I tried to count the ways this could be a prank, but each thought returned to the same hollow place, the smile that had never been natural. I drove back to Havenbrook because some things have their own gravity. The town was narrower than I remembered, streets folding like old maps. The carnival lot was a plot of weeds now, a yellow sign that warned of private property. But the bell, the little brass bell, hung from a pole in the middle of the lot, swinging with no wind to push it. It looked smaller than I had imagined. It looked, somehow, intentionally ordinary. He was there, standing by the bell, as if he had never left. There were no lights, no music, just the soft, relentless chirp of crickets. His costume was not bright. It was threadbare, a suit that carried the smell of old straw and candle wax. The balloon was dirtied, half deflated, and when he turned, I saw the eyes behind the painted sockets. They were not empty. They were watching me with the patience of stone. "I knew you would come," he said. His voice was a rasp like pages turning, like someone speaking with a mouthful of confessions. "You rang the bell, Ethan. You rang it well." My name in his mouth was a mirror that flashed back my face, only older and tired. I took a step back, but my legs were not mine. My heart pounded as if trying to hammer a door out of me, and each beat answered with a memory. The Ferris wheel, the girl who fell. No, I tell myself not to think of that. The scent of cotton candy stuck in my hair. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a photograph. Edges yellowed, the corners softened by time. It was me. Not now, but then. Little me, with sticky cheeks and a missing tooth, standing under the brass bell. Behind me in the photograph, between two carousel horses, was a blur, a smile carved too wide in the shadow, and for an instant my hands went numb because the blur wasn't a blur. It wasn't shadow, it was him. "Do you remember how it felt?" he asked. "To hear it ring for the very first time?" I wanted to tell him to go to hell. I wanted to tell him to take his smile and return to whatever circus of ashes had kept it. But I could not find the sound for words. He smiled that smile and walked toward me as if he were coming home. There are moments that narrow the world so small you can see the grain of reality. The bell swinging, my breath fogging in the air, his shoes scuffing the dirt. He lifted the rope and let the bell ring. It was different this time. The tone was lower, like the sound you hear when a book is closed for the last time. The ring uncoiled something inside me. Not memory, but a thread that could be followed back to a loom. It pulled, and I fell forward into a room I had not known existed inside my head. I saw the night the girl fell. I saw hands, mine, grasping for her. I saw a laugh that was not a human sound. I saw the clown's fingers, thick and delicate, lift her like a doll. I saw the wheel stop, not because of gravity, but because someone stopped it. I saw myself running, and then waking up alone with sugar on my lips. "Do you remember now?" he whispered. "Do you remember how it tastes to hold it, to keep the secret that keeps you warm?" The air tasted of metal and sweat. My mouth worked, but the words choked like old bread. I remembered not just the sight, but the decision. The one I had sealed away like a letter in a drawer. I had been too small to stop everything. I had been there, and I had looked away, because eyes can only hold so much. I had laughed, because if you laugh when you're afraid, the world becomes easier to carry. His smile spread. "We are a kind of family, you know," he said. "The bell calls us back." And then he laughed. It was the same laugh that had haunted my dreams for years, the one that sounded like a carousel rusting. It tasted like iron when it breathed over my face. The balloon rose, tugging at its string, and for a moment I thought of the little boy I had been, how he would have loved the lights, the cotton candy, the magic tricks. I wanted that boy to run into me and pull me away from this moment when the past wanted me to pay. But the past does not ask for money, it asks for return. "Will you ring with me?" he asked. His hand was out, not as a threat, but as an invitation. I looked at the bell. It hung patiently, a small, honest thing. If I took the rope, what would happen? Would the world crack open and foam spill out? Would I be freed? I reached for the rope because some prayers are only words that have already been spoken. When my fingers closed around the twisted cord, the bell felt like a heart. I pulled. The sound was final. It was a sentence. It was a door closing on all the children who had laughed there before. When the note left the bell, everything changed in a way that could not be unsaid. The ground did not shake, but the air shifted as if someone had turned the room inside out. The clown smiled, and behind that smile, 1,000 years of carnival stars opened like an umbrella. I felt it move, not the clown, but something under the skin of the night. It slid out of him and into me, or perhaps it slid out of me and became him. I do not know which is stranger. I only know that when I tried to speak after that, my voice came out rounder, painted. It came out with a smile I did not choose. "Welcome home," he said, but the words were not for me. They were for the bell. They were for whatever we had become. I tried to pull back, to shake the sound from my bones, but my hands were steady. They knew how to hold the rope. They will tell you that the carnival left again the next morning, trailers dragging lights back down the highway. They will tell you that no one saw me walk away. They are not wrong. I walked with the bell at my side, a string between my fingers, a balloon swaying over my head. The town will remember another smile in the photos they find in the trunk of the old caravan, a smile that looks too wide, too smooth, too finished. If you ever hear a brass bell ringing in the middle of the night, a thin little note that sounds like a laugh, do not go to it. If someone calls your name from between the rides, do not answer. Keep your hands clean. Keep your tongue free of powdered sugar. Walk the other way. Because once the bell rings for you, you learn how to make the smile stay. You learn how to make children reach, and there is no unringing a bell. Fifth story, the hollow smile. I remember the first laugh like a wrong note in a hymn, echoing down Main Street in Millfield while the summer fair dimmed under a bruised sky. I was 8, clutching a sticky caramel apple when the clown found me. He called himself Mr. Harrow. His coat shimmered like old pennies, and his painted grin looked sewn on by cruel hands. Everyone laughed. I thought he was part of the fair. I was wrong. Years later, returning to clear my mother's house, I found a photo, me with the clown, my mother's note scrawled behind, "At the fair, remember to forget." I thought I had. The first sign came when the power failed. The town's neon lights died, and I heard careful footsteps upstairs. I told myself it was the house breathing, until morning, when colorless balloons waited at my bed. One carried a note, "Come find me where the laughter rests." I followed the string through the town to Hollow Lane, where shadows stuck to brick like old grudges. A music box lay in the gutter, still playing that carnival tune from my childhood. When I looked up, Mr. Harrow stood beneath a flickering lamp, smiling the same impossible smile. He said my name. "You always were good at finding the end of things." I asked what he wanted. "The last laugh," he whispered, showing me a cracked mirror. My reflection wavered, faceless. Memory flooded back, the Ferris wheel stalling, his hand on my shoulder, the smell of sugared rot. "You gave me the word," he said. 10 years sharpen it." After that night, the town changed. People smiled too easily. Children hummed carnival tunes. Faces began to stretch, painted into cheer. I tried to reason it away. Stress, grief, but the mirror pulsed in my coat like a second heart. I started seeing him everywhere, in windows, in rain reflections. Once I brushed a man on the street whose face split into that same grin before he vanished. Then I found an old tape. My young voice whispered, "He says he loves me," before the screen filled with the clown's grin. I burned the tape in the mirror, thinking it would end. By morning, the shards were back, arranged in a smile. Someone had written, "Keep the smile." That was when I understood. He didn't want laughter. He wanted memory, the kind that lives under the ribs. A week later, the carnival returned beneath the bridge. The air reeked of sugar and rust. Mr. Harrow waited, hat in hand, while the townsfolk drifted inside the tents, silent and blank-eyed. "Join them," he said. I tried to resist, but his voice carried the weight of my childhood. My feet obeyed. On the stage, he handed me the mirror. "Tell them your story." So I did. Every memory, every detail. The crowd listened, smiles widening as I spoke. When I finished, he lifted the mirror to them, revealing faces painted with eternal joy. "Now," he said, "we will mark you." He kissed my palm. The mirror flashed. I woke beneath the Ferris wheel, hands sticky with caramel and blood. My face was no longer flesh but paint. The grin would not move. In the shop window, I saw my reflection, my eyes small behind a smile too wide to belong to me. The town greeted me kindly. Everyone smiled the same. I ran to the river. My reflection laughed back. My voice was no longer mine, but a recorded jingle, looping endlessly. That's the truth. Laughter can be stolen, and once traded, it stays gone. You can burn the mirror 1,000 times, it will always reappear. At night, I walk Hollow Lane and watch the painted townsfolk sleep. I want to warn them, but the sound in my throat is carnival music. If you ever find a music box in the gutter or a mirror humming an old tune, don't touch it. Don't follow the string. Some gifts are traps made to close when you reach for them. But if curiosity wins, if you smile the way I do, know this. Once the hollow settles on your face, there is no return. You'll carry the show within you, and every time you look in the glass, a stranger will smile back, whisper.